Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. And it's a real pleasure to chair and moderate the discussion today of this webinar. As you may know, this webinar is part of the GP20 initiative, the GP20 multi-stakeholder initiative that was launched in 2018 as part of the anniversary celebrations of the guiding principles on internal displacement. And the initiative is really all about bringing attention to the issue of internal displacement, the visibility that it warrants on the international agenda, but moreover also sharing experience and strengthening collaboration to prevent, address, and resolve internal displacement. Today's webinar is one in a series of webinars that have already taken place over the past 2 years, and that covered a range of topics, ranging from durable solutions in the Horn of Africa to women's and girls' participation, addressing disaster displacement risk through local action, how to connect data to legal frameworks, and also most recently on financing and funding mechanisms for internal displacement. And the main purpose of all these webinars really is to share lessons learned, to share experience of practices, and jointly discuss how to draw lessons out of these to then adapt to other contexts, to learn what works and what drives success. And today's webinar, I'm extremely excited about because it takes a look at how data can guide national and local policy, planning, and response, what role data plays in addressing internal displacement ultimately. We'll hear about what data is available in different country contexts, and we will also discuss how data and evidence can directly inform policy processes and planning. Most importantly, what we'll also try to do in the discussion, and there I encourage you in your questions to really hone in on that, is to really understand what are the contextual drivers, what's the enabling environment that allows for success to happen. What really enables success in one context and might hinder it, or what are the conditions that are in place in another, and therefore a similar approach may or may not be successful. So what drives success and failure in the different contexts is something that is, I think, at the core of what many of us do, and on the data landscape, it's definitely something that's at the heart of what IDMC is interested in and very much guides our work. So I'm also pleased to say that these deliberations here, the discussions that we hold today, will feed into the work of the high-level panel on internal displacement that has taken up its work earlier this year. And we also, I believe, have members of the Secretariat of the panel participate today, not least of all the head of the Secretariat. So we really look forward also to their active participation. And it's great to see the interest and see that the outcomes of this session will directly then also inform their work. We have a great lineup of speakers, and all of them bring immense experience from a range of very different perspectives, different contexts, different institutional backgrounds, but all of them are actively engaged in searching for and achieving durable solutions to displacement, to internal displacement. And I very much look forward to hearing the experience that they will share with us. Sincere thanks to the colleagues at IOM, IDMC, and UNICEF, who, with support from UNHCR, also jointly co-organized this webinar and brought this great panel. So we'll begin, just for your information of how this will work out, we'll begin with a few opening remarks by IOM, followed by presentations by speakers from South Sudan, Cameroon, Philippines, and Afghanistan, probably in that order, depending on connectivity. And I will introduce each speaker before they speak, and they will be given around 5 to 10 minutes each, and after which we will then open the floor for questions and discussion. We unfortunately don't have very much time at our disposal, so I'll really ask the presenters to stick to the time limit that they were given, and also to those asking questions, which you can do in the chat box, and I'll say a little bit more about that, to be as concrete and concise as possible so that we can have a focused discussion. At the very end, I will ask each speaker to close the session and help us close it together by coming in with a concluding remark of just 1 minute and one final recommendation. But before we now start, and before I hand over the floor to Viviane from IOM, just a few housekeeping rules. For everyone who joins, but also for everyone not speaking, please keep your microphones muted and videos off at all times, unless you're called to speak. Of course, when you're given the floor, please unmute yourselves. For the question and answer session, as I mentioned earlier, put your questions please into the chat box, into the WebEx chat function, and identify yourself when you put in the question with your name, institutional affiliation, and then write the question, as I said, as concise as possible, please. We will continuously monitor the chat box. My colleagues are kindly doing that while I'm intently listening to the speakers. And we'll try to organize the questions in a manner that we can then pass them back to the panel and cover as many as possible. The final point, the webinar will be recorded and all the presentations will be shared, including with the recording, on the GP20 website. So you will be able to review and to check into the presentation in more detail. So without further ado, let's begin. I'd like to give the floor to Viviane van der Vorst of IOM. Viviane is the Senior Regional Project Manager for the DTM, the Displacement Tracking Matrix, at the Regional Evidence for Migration Analysis and Policy Project, based in IOM's Regional Office for Asia and Pacific. Viviane has a long experience really on working with data on internal displacement. She was the regional DTM coordinator in the IOM regional office of the Asia Pacific. She also served as a migration and policy expert within the IOM Afghanistan missions. So she will also be interested in hearing what our colleagues from Afghanistan will say, and also served as a secondee, as a senior migration policy advisor to the government of Afghanistan, where she was involved in the development of the Afghan labor migration policy. Viviane, with all this experience, I'm sure you have a good way of opening this discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, let me get my camera proper. Thank you so much, Bina. Good morning. For some of you, afternoon and evening for those in the Philippines, Bangkok, and in this region. A very warm welcome to all distinguished delegates, the fellow panelists, partners, colleagues, friends, to this GP20 webinar. I also want to extend a very special welcome to the Secretariat of the High-Level Panel on Internal Displacement, who are also joining us here on the webinar today. We hope, and especially we hope, that the results of today's webinar will not only be of interest, but will actually help in providing useful insights to contribute to informing discussions on the important work of the ALTP panel on internal displacement, as they really work to increase the global attention to internal displacement, while they are also very active in developing concrete recommendations for the member states, the United Nations system, and all other relevant stakeholders, really on how to better prevent, respond, and achieve solutions to internal displacement. Noting that the results of this webinar will be shared with the high-level panel for them to really take them into consideration when they are drafting their recommendations for the report. It's a really great honor to share my opening remarks here. And thanks to the GP20 coordination group and the entire team for organizing this webinar on data and evidence. I really look forward to listening to the presentations and all the discussions that will follow after the presentations. I have to stress, with over 20 years after the publication of the guiding principles on internal displacement, internally displaced people continue to be the largest group in need of humanitarian assistance. And to also stress again, as recently has been reported by IDMC, global figures on internally displaced people and IDPs reached an all-time high by the end of 2019. There were 50.8 million in IDPs, with approximately 45.7 as a result of conflict and violence. and 5.1 million as a result of disaster. And I really want to stress this again. The internal displacement data ecosystem is ever increasing. We really see it evolving. It's consisting of a very varied but very interconnected cohort. I mean, we have policymakers, operational actors, governments, private sectors, academia, national and local media outlets, and not to forget about not only humanitarian but also development actors. Noting that this webinar will cover how data available on internal displacement, which is generated from this ecosystem and is guiding national and local governments in their responses to prevent and address internal displacement, including the search and achievement of durable solutions. I would like to make a couple of observations. I will make it quick because I only have 5 minutes to support a bit of the discussion that will follow in the upcoming seminar. In addition to emergency life-saving assistance, it is recognized that addressing internal displacement demands and concerted a multifaceted approach. We're working to respond to emergency needs and longer-term approaches. It is necessary to reduce people's vulnerabilities and identify sustainable solutions. Now, for this to happen, and we all know, comprehensive and accurate data is vital. It's vital to build an adequate understanding, and especially to understand the support, the decision and policymakers need to respond to help the full magnitude, severity, and diversity of internal displacement solutions. Nonetheless, the comprehensiveness and the accuracy of this data is just one part to the critical path needed to ensure those in risk or those who have been forced to displace and are able to obtain solutions to meet the individual needs. What we will see is that our panelists today represent those key actors vital to ensuring that data meets policy and practice. I think, and we all hope so, this webinar comes at a critical time for the community to bring additional attention to and reflect on best practices, as well as our next step forwards. Next step forwards to ensure that we can have strong and reliable data and evidence to support the mobilization of the response. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused global mobility to come to almost a near standstill, borders closed or partially closed, or complex local mobility restrictions. It is, even with some restrictions being lifted, internally displaced populations are among some of the most vulnerable population groups that have been and unfortunately will remain one of the first to confront the harsh impacts of this crisis. Stressing that this must, however, not detract us from the reality that severe and deep embedded vulnerabilities and protection needs existed before this current crisis. It is therefore it's vital that while data evidence adapts to this new reality that the global pandemic presents, that we as a community, we are adapting upon, let's not forget about all of our past lessons learned, our past achievements, and all the progress that we have made so far. Issues commonly identified across different contexts and obstacles to obtain comprehensive and quality data and evidence can be attributed to the lack of common data standards, coordination challenges, and the limited data interoperability. Strong collaboration, reaching beyond borders and between data providers, government, researcher, and all the other actors. For example, this webinar, it's a really good example, can help to explore the untapped potential of data data to generate important evidence and insights about the whole spectrum of human mobility. I mean, human mobility for displacement, for cross-border migration, and also for return. It is important that we build on tools for collecting and sharing information, those related to displacement movements, but really in compliance with the principles of neutrality, impartiality, and confidentiality. And that we gather and analyze data to disseminate critical and really multi-layered information on the mobility, vulnerabilities, and needs of displaced population. This will enable decision and policymakers and also the respondents on the ground to provide these populations with better context for specific assistance that is needed. Now, with all of this, I would like to hand over to Bina again to introduce all of our panelists. And again, a warm welcome to all of you. I really look forward to listening to all of the presentations and engaging in the discussion that follow after the presentations with the Q&A section of this webinar. Thank you, Bina. Over.
Thank you very much, Viviane. And thank you for almost sticking to your time. And I tested this one with you and would encourage, this says 1 minute, all speakers, if I put this up to slowly come to a close. But Viviane, you really opened this session extremely well and give us the right framing, I think, in particular also highlighting what we're looking for here are concrete lessons, concrete recommendations, not least because there's this opportunity to feed into the high-level panel, but also because we've already collectively identified some of the challenges which you mentioned in the ever-increasing and complexifying data ecosystem, the need for a concerted and collaborative approach now, and that data really needs to meet policy. And I think if the current situation with the pandemic has taught us anything, then it's really the importance of data, but that is communicable, that is usable, and that can directly guide policy, regulation, planning, and investment. So I think Getwich would be really the right one to kick us off on this, really from a very local perspective. Getwich is himself, or has been, and is, I think still is himself, an IDP. He was born in the Unity State Bentiu in South Sudan. And then he went to school in a refugee settlement camp in Uganda, and then went on to secondary school and nursing school, and then not just his diploma in nursing, but in addition to that, studied agricultural engineering, graduating last year in 2019, and has, as if that wasn't enough, has now also started to pursue a master's degree at the University of Juba, at the Graduate School of Public Service. And after having grown up in a refugee camp, he was then once again displaced in 2013 after the mass killings in Juba, and has been living in an IDP camp in Juba for the last 6 years. So with this experience, he will now really tell us more about how young people are already contributing to addressing internal displacement, building resilience, and in particular, he will help us understand how we can become better collectively at enabling young people to become part of the solutions that they themselves seek, how they can be better involved in planning right from the outset, right from the point where there are investments being made, data is collected, plans are developed. So Gatwich, over to you, and we very much look forward to hearing from you. I think the connection was working, so please go ahead. My colleagues will work the slides for you.
Thank you. I'm really very happy to join you today in this very important meeting. Here I'm going to young IDP in Juba, South Sudan, and data and evidence gatherings, and how these things are affecting. So now, first I'm going to talk the role of young IDP in Juba, South Sudan. IDPs they are playing vital roles. This vital role that include the provision of financial assistance to the family, relatives, and community after securing jobs from non-governmental organizations. Health service, youth are the key to community health by disseminating health education messages to community and participate in general cleanings. use for IDP use generally. Uh, they support fight against domestic violence and anti-social behavior in public camp settings. Excellent focal point for all NGOs in IDP camps and refugees settlement. These are the roles that youth have been playing, and on that, education service to the community. Most IDP youth volunteer in teaching for whole community members like children and adults who have poor access to education prior to civil war in my country. For example, most teachers in Juba POC are IDP youth. Youth are also provide leadership service to the community in IDP camps, and they are volunteering, or they have volunteerism in registration of IDPs. Then next thing that I would like to talk about, how young IDP can contribute to improve data and evidence to inform responses. For us to do this, there will be improved engagement and ownership of IDP in finding a better solution from programs designed to implementation. Young IDP can support decision-making processes and whole core works of camp by representing the will of the people. Formation of focus group for young IDP to brainstorm on possible means to better address needs. Discussion made behind closed door is likely to fail, but one decided by the young IDP who are the part of the community will help improve success rate. These are innovative and support tech solutions. Timely reporting by using synchronized smartphone, tablets, and data analysis. Young IDP act as a bridge between UN agencies, government, NGOs, and IDPs, and can help build trust to collect more. Volunteerism on community service is one way how this data can be collected. Evidence-based data can be collected. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for this really concise and yet dense, full of information contribution, Gadwich. I mean, you cover a whole range of issues, but most importantly of all, you're highlighting here that young IDPs and IDPs in general are not just recipients and beneficiaries in a sense of, say, education or health programs or any type of support or solutions, but really themselves actively are already shaping it. The experience of young IDPs being teachers clearly points us to the need for involving them directly in the planning. So 2 points really from yours, which I think we'll hear about in the next presentation as well, is really the need for strong and inclusive baseline data collection. And the point you make on a decision being made behind a closed door is likely to fail. In the education sector, we will actually hear precisely on this from an experience in a municipality in Cameroon. Mr. Angwang is the president of ComSuda at the mayor's office of Bamenda of the government of in Cameroon. He has himself conducted extensive data collection to help improve Bamenda's education system, all the way from early childhood development, so kindergarten age through to higher education, and really focused on the need of IDPs and of young IDPs and children internally displaced in the municipality. And now he has plans to replicate these efforts, to take his experience to Douala and Yaoundé. So, Mr. Angwang, over to you for what will surely be a very interesting contribution. Mr. Angwang, you're breaking up right now. Shall we maybe try, I don't know, are you trying with the camera or without? If so, we can try without the video and just with the sound. We hear you, but you're breaking up. We should just go ahead and try. We'll give it a try.
We want to switch how our organization has been working we have been to meet up with the realities of and have moved into the open center. Of
I'm terribly sorry to come in and interrupt you, but the sound is really, really difficult, unfortunately, to hear you, even though the slides are very clear and apparently full of information. I'm just checking with my colleagues who help organize whether we could either do something about the sound or we have someone who can help take us through the slides, because it's hard to understand you, unfortunately. I'm really sorry about that.
Can we try to turn the video off and just speak on the phone for audio? Because I think that might make it clearer. Let's try.
Thank you, Laura. Ms. Amwan, would you try without the video
Yes.
once more?
yes,
It seems better, much better. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Maybe
Thank you very much.
recap from the previous slide,
Yes,
just 1 minute, please.
Slides we sent above is first with education. You find children on, and these are situations where community, parents, and some teachers have decided to put the children together just education, because for 3 years these children, the structure, if you look at the structure we have there, that's been abandoned. There are no benches inside. And so that is just a small village setting where the children who could not escape the war, they have to stay back in the village and just try to go to school. So there are no structures for these children. Even the teachers are not paid. It is just their common initiative to put the children together and give them a bit of education. The other part of this is in town, the urban setting, where most of them who have run into cities are either prostitutes when it comes to the girl child. For the boys, they have joined violent group, bandits, just to survive. And I want to take on the next slides, which we have, which will be on the data collection of these IDP persons. We move from place to place, and I want to tell you how we're able to collect this data. It's not been easy, but we've been able to meet church groups, some of the quarter heads, some NGOs or common initiative groups in the town who are able to tell us where these displaced persons are hiding, because it is not easy also to locate them. With the pandemic of COVID-19, it is far more difficult to reach out for some of the areas where they to do our them. The education is available. I want to say parents are much more available to bet and aid to their place of origin. The girls and the boys in City 2 have also accepted that they are willing to go back to school. They are willing to be rehabilitated and to continue, provided there will be some funding or some assistance. And ComSUDA is only pleading that you come to the aid of these children, because even the government is unable to reach out to the displaced persons who are right inside the bushes. The slides above is not done in the city. It is done inside the bushes. The city situations are different. But inside the bushes, we have to find it very tough sometimes to meet these displaced persons who sometimes even sleep in the trees or under trees for months, and they eat now like wild animals. There's nobody who gives them food or water, and less information about even the COVID-19. Until ComSuda is able to move as far as you can imagine into the interior, then we're able to collect this data. And before we come to the issue of the Talent City, which has been giving its support so far in terms of data collection, we will also tell you that one of our main challenges has been to reach out to those persons. And I want to tell you that we'll be able to furnish you with enough data, the one which you might even weep or cry, because we only believe we should be able to reach out, because we've just had a distress call yesterday from some of the other areas and interior suburban areas where situations there is deplorable, as we are also experiencing rainy season. And it is our wish that we want to go to those areas, but we need to find it. We need to buy our way through. We need to be ready and prepared to meet militiamen and groups who definitely have to ask for their own assistance or money so that they can give us access to meet the displaced persons. If not, we will not be able to go into the interior to meet these persons we are talking about. And I have to tell you about our roadmap. Like I said before, ComSuda has been in the field for the past 2 years. That is, our roadmap is to build on a relation, and we want to recommend a data-driven policy that addresses the learning access need of the most marginalized. We want to create challenges and campaigns which encourage youth to own and as well solve social problems, design thinking, and equally engage employer to learn how to earn connection. And I will also tell you to provide learning facilities and professional skills for schools. And I think basically that's what we put together. And if you keep asking questions, I think I will keep telling you more things depending on what you want me to tell you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this informative set of slides, but even more so for your summary and for your insights into the challenges of even doing basic data collection in non-urban settings and in settings where actually there are internally displaced people may be hiding or maybe living really in hard to reach areas. The fact, I mean, just the sheer scale of out of school youth is quite staggering, and we see that, of course, in other contexts as well. So what I really take away from this, and I'm quite impressed by, is this combination of a very local assessment and localized solution making, and yet a very systemic approach that you're aiming for, and that I believe you're now seeking to really translate into not just more cities, but also connect with the national level plans and processes. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions, but before we open up the floor, we have 2 more presentations from the representatives of 2 governments, in which I think the next one will connect quite nicely to yours here, to the one that we just heard. We will hear from Mr. Clifford Riveral. He's the director of the Disaster Response Management Bureau of the Department of Social Welfare and Development in the Republic of the Philippines. And why I think it connects well is really because he will start to speak to us about a very, one of the, I would say, most comprehensive national data collection and systems, and how that supports the government of the Philippines in developing durable solutions. Director Ivral is a member and graduate of the Philippine Military Academy, and having studied there and also collecting a few masters after that, he embarked on a very distinguished military career, but also then combined that and developed that into a lot of experience and work on data and information systems, as well as disaster preparedness and response. After more than 36 years in the military service of the Philippines, he was therefore then invited to serve under the government as the director of the bureau. And with this also oversees DROMIC, which is, as I said, one of the most comprehensive displacement, national displacement and disaster data collection systems, and is also one of the key sources for IDMC. So I really look forward to hearing from you. Over to you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you. Mabuhay and good evening from the Philippines. We would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to this webinar to impart our country's milestones and continuing initiatives. As a backgrounder, next slide please. Next slide please. As a backgrounder, the Philippines is a disaster risk, has a very disastrous risk profile. We are in the ring of fire. We are visited by not less than 20 tropical cyclones a year, not to mention earthquakes and man-made disasters like those as mentioned by the previous speaker. Next slide, please. We are organized by the Department of National Defense, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development is under the disaster response pillar. There are 4 pillars: preparedness, response, prevention and mitigation, and rehabilitation. Now, all these 4, although our department is focused with the response pillar, we are looking into everything, into all these pillars. Next slide, please. The Disaster Response Operation Monitoring and Information Center is a system where data is gathered. This is where data is collected, and the information emanates from our ground forces, or the ground social workers. They are the ones forwarding to us through electronics, either via cell phone or communication equipment, so that the data will be collected in our center. We try to come up with the most, as much as possible, updated to an hour, so that the leaders can come up with strategic and operational planning. The information that is being sent to us are not just by the number of families. It is already a disaggregated data. So it varies from males, females, by sex, by age group, the vulnerables like elderlies, pregnant, lactating mothers, toddlers, and people with disability. So with this data, we are able to analyze what kind of support can we extend to the displaced people. Before a disaster, long time before the disaster, we try to study, we try to gather already information. Who are these vulnerables? Because in the far-flung areas, in the most vulnerable areas, like storm surge, we try to identify who are those who cannot afford to be relocated. Having this data on hand, this is where we start to plan. We look forward so that when the disaster strikes, it would not really mean too much for us to compute because we already have an estimate of how much people or how much IDPs are we need to address. Next slide, please. The DROMIC also has a predictive analytics for humanitarian response. The data here does not just belong to our troops or from the people, from the social workers outside. We also gather in data from other agencies like the meteorological centers, the Pag-asa, or the mines and geosciences, the Philippine Volcanic Institute. We get data from them so that when they say that there is, for instance, the volcano just this January, or should I say during the COVID, the Taal volcano, before it started erupting, we are already being fed with information. So we are able to relay this information to our workers, to the social workers in the area. So they are already ready. They know what to do and what are the things that needs to be done. So we all have a lot of solutions and for disaster recovery, and most of them are from this DROMIC. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riveral, and thank you so much for giving us such detailed insight into the systems that you've set up, and also really the experience that the Philippines has made with the need to collect disaster displacement data, but also more broadly disaster data in a sense already before the event. So to really understand where the most vulnerable people are, but not just the numbers, but also the conditions they live in, the pre-existing vulnerabilities, and then rely on a pre-existing network of social workers and responders on the ground to be able to really have the most effective response. So thank you very much again. I'm sure in the discussion we'll come back to this experience and what role data systems can play therefore in becoming better prepared and investing more in prevention. One part of the three pillars of the GP20 that is often neglected, prevention rather than just response. So last but definitely not least, we have a contribution that I very much look forward to from Mr. Sabar and Mr. Afghan, the director for IDPs, the director of IDP verification and response at the Ministry of Refugees and Repatriations in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Mr. Sabar is the general director of the institution that oversees the development of national IDP policies and nationwide implementation. The directorate provides and coordinates immediate but also response as well as long-term support for IDPs and has developed a number of durable solutions approaches and also coordinate efforts, international efforts in the country to support IDPs. Mr. Afghan is the director working very closely with Mr. Sabar, as I said, on IDP verification and response. And his office in particular leads the implementation of the IDP verification system. This includes an IDP petition system and then compensation mechanisms. And he also coordinates the ministry's humanitarian development and reintegration efforts. So we really hope that the connection will work. We had a few issues, but then it did work. So I will now give the floor to Mr. Afghan, who will present to us in English. But both Mr. Sabar and Mr. Afghan will be there to answer questions, and they will share with us experience from Afghanistan on how data is informing the very comprehensive national and local response systems and policies, and also of the interaction really between policy development and the development of data systems. Mr. Afghan, I really hope that this works. Over to you.
Hello to everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Desai and everyone for giving us the opportunity to present in this important webinar. And sorry for the trouble. We had some trouble with connecting through this webinar, but now we hope I'm using my mobile phone, so I hope it works for the time of the webinar that we are in. Just to start, let me give a brief introduction or a brief a picture of the mandate of our ministry. What are we doing? We are a leading entity at the government level that coordinate efforts that deals with IDPs issue asylum and also refugees that we have outside Afghanistan, and we coordinate all responses that deals with these displacement issues inside and outside Afghanistan that pertains to the Afghan population. And specifically, our task as IDP General Directorate, as you mentioned, Ms. Desai, in your introduction, is we have this IDP policy that was developed by this directorate in coordination with all stakeholders, and we are responsible now for its implementation and revisiting and updating this policy over time with changes that is happening. This policy includes also immediate responses to IDPs and other displaced populations, as well as durable solutions to different parts of the society. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Uh, uh, for data, we also have we have two types of IDPs and displaced populations, especially IDPs. One is caused by natural disaster, and other by man-made disasters, specifically the conflict and insecurity in different parts of the country. So the data we gather is on geographical approach and also based on types of the incidents that we have. And we gather the data from provincial level. We have our directorates, DORR directorates at the provincial level that coordinate their data gathering approaches with the international and national NGOs. And we have a mechanism of OCT where they try to go to the IDP's sites and the case loads that is been reported about IDP. So they verify that, and after we have a verified data, we report it to different entities, including international and national level. We also have a coordination with our national statistics and information authority inside Afghanistan. And they are the sole entity that is responsible for giving national census and data about different types of sectors and different issues inside Afghanistan. So we coordinate our data with the National Statistics Office inside Afghanistan as well. For we have for returnees, we have a system that was developed by in cooperation with IOM, the RS system, that's Afghanistan Refugee Information System. All the returnees that are coming from any country inside Afghanistan, we try to register that at the 0 point, and we have different indicators regarding these returnees based on sex, based on gender, sex, age group, and also about geographical location and from where they come, their income. There are a variety of indicators that we have in these systems, and we provide different types of reports to different entities based on that system. We also have a scope system that is currently being managed by WFP, and we are trying to implement it inside the ministry. Scope in itself has both IDPs and returnees that is there with WFP, and we for from time to time, if we need data, we have this cooperation agreement and we ask about certain data, so we have some access to that. But we are trying to implement that scope system for in the first phase for IDPs to register all IDPs that are there in Afghanistan, so that we have data about various indicators about IDPs. And also we have the IDP petition system that is based on a standard operating procedure that is being signed between the Ministry of Refugees and Repatriation and the UN Humanitarian Coordinator. And that outlines how a caseload has to be tackled, how data has to be collected, how responses has to be provided, and how we can do that in a very short span of time so that the emergency aspect of it is being respected. We do need assessment. We have joint assessments with NGOs and international organizations at the local level. Whenever a caseload happens, we form teams that do joint assessments, and all data has been all data has to be verified by this joint team, and then once that data is verified, it is reported nationally. And the response is provided by different clusters. You are familiar with different clusters. I'm not going to go into detail, but we have food cluster, health cluster, also wash cluster, and different other clusters that are providing different type of assistance to these IDP based on their needs and based on the assessments that we do. Next slide, please. Once we do these assessments at the provincial level and all the data that we receive, we use for our planning purpose, we use data from a series of years, you know, the trends that we have from, for example, for the last 3 years or 5 years, what are the trends of IDPs and displacements inside Afghanistan? And sorry, I didn't mention, we also have DTM data. The DTM is they collect data from the field level all over Afghanistan about displacement. That includes also internal displacement. They also cover refugees and returnees and all types of displacement data. And we launch joint reports when they launch their report. And another, they also report on secondary displacement, the returnees that come to Afghanistan and they can't go to their places of origin, so they are secondary displaced people, and we have that data from DTM, and we collaborate on different aspects of that DTM. All the reports are being coordinated, and we try to launch it together, and we did that for a couple of times. For 2 years, we launched our joint reports on displacement inside Afghanistan. All these data serve as a basis for our plans and implementation and policies that we made. Our approaches are guided by national IDP policy that we have, and we have at the higher level various mechanism of coordination under the President Office that deals with refugees and returnees and also IDPs issues. And we have, for example, High Commission for Migration that deals with that. We have a subcommittee of ministers for IDPs and nomads. And we also have an executive mechanism of direct for implementing the decisions that are being made at the higher level in these different councils. For durable solution, we are coordinating, you know, displacement is not a job of, you know, the problems related to displacement is not a job of one ministry. So we coordinate our efforts with various national stakeholders, especially ministries, and also international and national stakeholders. There are various national priority programs that kind of touch upon different displacement issues. For example, we have the Easy Car, or it's a employment creation national priority program. We have Citizen Charter program. We have various other programs that deals with displacement. We also have a decree 305 that deals with the settlements and land distribution to IDPs and returnees inside Afghanistan that is guided by these national priority programs. And all these NPPs are uh, guided, or let's say take their guidance from the SDG goals of the UN, and our approaches to humanitarian to IDP intervention is also guided by the guiding principles of the UN that we have. And if you can read our IDP policy, all these humanitarian principles for IDPs are the guiding principle are there in our policy. And we, with different NGOs and international organization, we have memorandum of understanding, and based on that memorandum of understandings or MOUs, they design their packages and their programs, and they do implementation at the local level or subnational level. At subnational level, we have the provincial governor that is leading the approaches or the intervention in IDP sector, and we also have the OCTs, the operation coordination teams that are co-led by our DORRs in the national and international organization at local level, and they coordinate issues. These OCTs and these committees at the provincial level are organized on according to a timetable, and they can organize on emergency-based meetings as well. And these OCTs were very effective during the drought we had in 2018 and 19 in the western parts of the country. The response that was provided in the coordination that was there was tremendous. Challenges, data collection and data, getting accurate data and getting the data that serves the purposes of the planning is really hard to get. It's not possible to get complete data set. From one side, it's the security issues, the socioeconomic circumstances, and different other, the conflict itself and in the nature of that, the nature of that people, like ID, the displaced people, it kind of hinders collection of data. And also, getting reliable data is very challenging. We have practices of various organization collecting the same data, and it's recurring, and it's sometimes using a lot of resources by getting the same data. So coordination and sharing data is one of our priorities to achieve among different stakeholders, which we are trying to do that, and we are still not successful. And we stressed this point that data sharing and coordination is very necessary for best use of resources, getting timely assistance to IDPs, and getting or designing approaches that are sustainable for IDPs and other displaced populations. And the standards also, sometimes the formats that are used by one organization is different from the another organization, and the requirement that is there from the government side, sometimes it's not respected. So different standards are being used by different organizations, and the synergy between the data is something that needs to be tackled, and that's we are planning to do that, but it's not an easy job. It's a very challenging job, and wish us best of luck. Um, Also, the implementation of IDP policy, we have this policy from around 8 years ago, and the realities has changed somehow. So that document, it requires a political will to revise that document, to revisit that document and update it, and rethink about the durable solutions that are being that are there in this IDP policies to rethink about that durable solution in the approaches that are there. And last but not the least, in all our approaches, we should not exclude the host communities and their problems that are facing from different incidents that are resulting in IDPs. That's it from my side. I'm open to question whatever question is there, and if Mr. Sabar is going to add any point, maybe he can add it in later. He still had some problem with his connection when I had a contact with him. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you and for this really comprehensive presentation. And just kind of before I open the floor, what really impressed me here was, of course, you know, the really almost sophisticated, I would say, levels of coordination and collaboration that you've managed to develop at the policy level and institutional level. And yet, despite all that, you say that there's still a long way to go on data sharing, on collaboration around data. Of course, also not just between the different parts of your government, but then with different actors, international actors. So I think we'll have a lot to discuss on that. But then also your point that you made at the end, and you already mentioned it at the beginning when you talked about the need for the importance of where the execution of decisions is located. That's something I've heard. Oh, it's such an important function because we often think about the policy, but then now at the end you point us to the challenge of the need for political will, and then also that high-level executive function, the will to update existing policies, update existing standards, existing programs, using the evidence of changing circumstances, changing realities, not least in the current situation. So thank you very much for sharing this experience. There are already questions coming in that are very pertinent to your presentations, but also the other presentations. So we're collecting the questions in the chat. I would like to encourage everyone once more to just write their names in the chat and the questions. My colleagues are collating them. And while we do that, I wanted to open now the question and answer and discussion part of this webinar. And it's great to see we have a full half hour for this. With calling on two colleagues from our UN partners, UNHCR first and then UNICEF, who are coming in also with specific questions and examples. First of all, I would like to invite from UNHCR, Mr. Henry Serge Atsomotsi. He's the Senior Protection Officer at UNHCR, and it will bring another perspective very briefly, not a presentation, but in the form of a contribution to the question and answer from West Africa, I understand. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well. Please continue.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about the experience of Niger, the Republic of Niger. Niger is the first African country to have been domesticated in 2009 Kampala Convention by adopting the law of 10th of December 2018 relating to the protection and assistance of IDPs. In October last year, the Minister of Humanitarian Action and Disaster Management released a decree establishing a national committee for data collection and information management on IDPs. The committee was decentralized a couple of months later at the regional level, with the creation of regional committees in the 4 regions hosting IDPs in Niger. The National Committee for Data Collection and Information Management on IDPs has a broad range of responsibilities, but I will pick, let's say 4, which are of interest to this webinar. So there is the development of tools for collecting and sharing information relating to population movements in compliance with the principles of neutrality, impartiality, and confidentiality. There is also the identification of strategies for collecting, compiling, consolidating, and validating demographic data on IDPs and returnees. The analysis of trends in population movements, and the publication of data related to IDPs on a monthly basis. The main goal of data collection is to have reliable IDP figures and profiles that support robust protection analysis, informed programming priorities and decisions, effective advocacy, and opportunities for solutions. The aim is also to set up and maintain a database that will be used to generate lists of for assistance at household level. So this would be interested regarding food, cash, shelter. So the aim is also to generate a list of households having persons with specific needs and detect potential cases of statelessness. The National Committee is composed of the Minister of Humanitarian Action and Disaster Management or his representative, who is the chairperson, the Director General of Civil Status, Migration and Refugees, who is the vice chairperson, and 3 rapporteurs, including the Director of Legislation of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, and UNHCR representatives. As you can see, it's a very inclusive process. So the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs ensures the secretariat of the committee, and the committee meets on a monthly basis at the invitation of the chairman. The operating costs are covered by the national budget or any other resources mobilized by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. In terms of support provided by UNHCR, let's say UNHCR has proactively supported the whole process. This support includes the development of data collection tools, the development of appropriate methodologies for data collection, and also the training of trainers and members of the committee at both regional, national, and regional levels.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry to be so rude and come in here, but we do want to have a question and answer session, and it's great to hear your perspective here, but I am cutting it short in the interest of all the interesting questions that people have asked. Apologies. But you do point to a really important aspect also, and not to forget the reliability of IDP figures when it comes to informing programming and also informing advocacy. So thank you very much for that. And it would be great if you could maybe add into the chat box just the additional information in writing that you wanted to add on UNHCR's responses. I really apologize for cutting you short there, but I do want to give the floor very briefly to Jan Bijse from UNICEF before then opening up and referring back to the questions that we have here. Jan, over to you.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Bina, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the presenter so far. This was very interesting. It was touching on a couple of things which I would like to comment on, and also have a question then. But first, I would like to take the opportunity to really make a strong advocacy for an increased effort to collect data on children in IDP situations. Because if we talk about children, we talk about the most vulnerable among the already vulnerable group of IDPs. We have heard earlier that there are over 50 million persons living in internal displacement at the end of 2019, most of them due to conflict and violence. This is around 10 times or around double the amount 10 years earlier. There are more IDPs than refugees, but usually IDPs take the backseat in the public discussions on displacements, which starts to change now, luckily, so it's a good time to talk about this. And among these 50 million IDPs, we have around 21 million children, which makes them more than 40%. But this number is only really a rough estimation since we lack concrete information on the number of children. So this is a really an estimation is based, because also we have only information on age for around 14% of countries with IDPs. They have data disaggregated by age, and even less the countries do it in a consistent manner. So as a comparison, if you look at international migrants, 80% of countries have data on age. And even for refugees, it's still 60% of the refugee population we have the information on age. So why is it important to know about age of IDPs and about information on children of among IDPs? It's because at the end, these data gaps which we face have a direct negative impact on internally displaced children's fate. It has influence on their access to services and education. It can have negative impact on their well-being and then also on their long-term development. Because without the right data, and this means kind of accurate data at the right time, so timely data, recent data, the protection risk and vulnerability of the children remain by and large unknown, and interventions cannot be appropriately responsive. So poor data actually violates these children's right to a fair and equal chance in life. Because, I mean, children have special needs compared to adults. They differ. Those needs relate to protection, to the need of being together with family or caretakers. For example, when they got separated during displacement events. It has important effects on the access to health services, possibility to learn, and having in general the right, I mean, the influence the right for a safe environment, which let them develop to their full potential. So data, or in the broader context, information, stands at the beginning when we want to change something. Or as the former UN Secretary Kofi Annan was saying, it is crucial to invest in data. Without good data, we are flying blind. And if you can't see it, you can't solve it. So now the question, what can be done to improve the situation? And there are two things. One is we can invest in improved data collection efforts. And we heard this already about from the Afghanistan situation, how there's really a very sophisticated system to collect data, but we have to include the age aspect. And if the age aspect is already included, we have to make sure that it's shared both nationally, but also internationally. And the other way is to find innovative ways to collect data. And this doesn't have to be new technologies. This can be done also with new ways how to do this. And I thought the example from South Sudan was really very interesting in this one. So and my question would be really in the context of to the panelists, to focusing on children. I mean, one is that would be general one to everyone. What governments can do to improve the collection of information, not only of numbers, but the collection of information and data on children in their existing data collection. And maybe also one question that specifically to Gatwesh from South Sudan. He was talking about the benefits of involving young people in collecting information, collecting data. I'd also like to know what kind of challenges he sees in doing this. And if according to his experience, this could be something which is transferable to other IDP situations in other settings or other countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. And you've already touched on also some of the questions that came up in the chat. So thank you to both of you for those additional perspectives and questions. I've just reading through what has come in, tried to organize it a little bit in the interest of time so that we have enough time for the panelists to respond. Maybe we do a first round and see what else comes in. We have a number of questions around the need for age disaggregated, sex disaggregated, disability, etc. aggregated data and to allow for adapted responses. And here there's also the link to Jan's question on children and specific data, not just in terms of numbers, but vulnerabilities around of children, etc., and their specific needs, both to Getwich as well as to Mr. Riveral. I think has already said that he would like to take one of those questions at least. So I will give the floor to you for responding briefly, please, concise to those before I go to the next batch. Mr. Riveral, first, please.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. During displacement, our camp managers are the ones who are handling, who provide the center for, who are the ones who are looking into who are those in his camp. So we identify who are the elderly, who are the young ones, who are the male, females. These are all charted, and in this chart, this is where we try to look into a number of things. One is food. What kind of food do we provide? For example, those who are with persons with disability, we try to identify what is their need so we can address and they will not get sick inside the camp. Now, there are other things aside from food. We also, I mentioned in my chat, in a chat box, about activity areas. We collect parents, mothers. We give them ideas on what to do, what are the things they can do inside camp to make them productive. In like manner, children are given workspaces or children's spaces where they can do schoolwork or activities, school activities that they can that will keep them also busy. For protection, aside from, although there is we have the local police who will be watching over the area, we cannot just leave them alone. And so we try to tell the parents and those who have who are older ones to take care of their children or the young ones. It is really hard for us for the camp managers to look into, especially if your camp has more than 100 families. It's really hard to look into how we will handle these young ones. That's all.
Thank you very much. And Gatwich, would you like to also complement that? You're muted in case you're speaking. I'm going to try once more to give you the floor now. Would you like to complement what Mr. Riveral said?
Hello.
Yes, speak.
Thank you. Thank you for having me one more. Good evening, everybody. Here, I was asked about the challenges that I face or IDPs across the world in data collection. Like in my country, there's insecurity. Security personnel sometimes intentionally refuse data collectors to do their work. Sometimes when someone countryside them. For example, when you go with GPRS or tablet, they may say that you are collecting information from the country. You know, that negative attitude is still very high. Besides that problem, there's non-cooperation among community. Some try to collect the data. The community may ask you, what are the benefits of this data? You may try your best to explain to the community the main intention of this data. One, they know that this one will have a long benefit, or maybe maybe the benefit will come after some time. They may intentionally refuse to give the accurate information that you need. Then another one is about economic constraint. Sometimes you try to young IDPs to collect information. They may need enough money. They need big money sometimes to sustain their life because people are too desperate. Everything that you do, it need money. Everything that you do, it need money. Even the money that is allocated by the very organization that try to collect data, they have go with the money that is needed by IDPs. Another one is there's a sometimes due to natural occurrence, there might be rain, a storm. Sometimes a specific date is set for data collection and maybe interrupt. Like now, before this meeting, I was about to be interrupted by the rain because there was rain that has rained for like 30 minutes. It was about to interrupt. Those are natural calamities that sometimes data collector face. Thank you very much for
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go now back to Mr. Sabar and Mr. Afghan with really three questions, which are to some extent, some of them interrelated. But I do think that you will be well placed to respond to them, and some of them were put directly to you. One is around how currently data collection may be impacted by the pandemic and the restrictions associated with managing COVID-19. But that is also in the context maybe of a broader question, how we can ensure that we understand the vulnerability of IDPs in comparison or in relation to also the existing vulnerability of local and national populations, something that's very important for development actors to understand and to know in order to actually address and integrate IDPs into development planning and of course also into COVID response as we know currently. That's kind of two questions together maybe to you, and a final one that was also put to you on the role of city governments and whether you believe that data needs to be collected at the city level for them to develop policies on internal displacement for their municipalities, or where the provincial level is sufficient from your experience. Please, over to you, Mr. Afghan and Mr. Sabar.
Thank you. You hear me, yeah?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. COVID-19, indeed, it's a global challenge. Still, it's a challenge in Afghanistan. I'm sure it is at a global scale in other countries as well. And not only data collection, but our interventions were also impacted by COVID, and different approaches and strategies were used to tackle that. For example, using local communities for intervention to IDPs. There were various programs designed to engage local community to list out vulnerable population in their areas and share it with them, and the assistance was also provided through local community, but was coordinated by municipal and also district level officials. So that was something that is still a challenge. And plus, in situation like Afghanistan, we thought with COVID we will have a decrease in armed conflict and security situation would improve. And with the peace talks, we see that there is a tremendous increase in the conflict and violence in different parts of the countries. Not only we have COVID, we also have increased numbers of IDPs in recent months. So both these challenges, from one side, access was an issue in COVID. In the beginning, especially when quarantine was there, some NGOs, some organization, the communication flow was not as smooth as it should be, so that it allowed, although the government made an exception for humanitarian organizations to move freely across the country and inside cities, but that communication was sometimes not, that communication flow was not good, but it improved recently. Now that we don't have that limitations of the data collection in COVID and some it from home, the intervention requires a field level intervention. So that is an issue. And about vulnerability, I agree with Jan, you know, that based on vulnerability is important issue. Sometimes, you know, it should be the need one will be very much different from another family of IDPs. So that is why
I fear we lost Mr. Are you there? I'm really sorry you're breaking up. So, but we will try again for the final minute that I'm going to give to each of the speakers. Thank you very much for answering these questions.
yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, I was coming in because you were breaking up and we could not hear you, but you will get an extra minute at the end. I just want to make sure that we end in time. So I will give you the floor once more. Thank you very much and apologies for the technical difficulties. But I do want to, as I said, close off after this set of questions, keeping in mind that there were two more questions that came our way here and that maybe one of you might want to pick up in your final remarks. One was around the role of the judiciary in advancing on internal displacement, and this was really to any of the panelists. Of course, an important question, also a very broad one. And then the second question was really about what type of advocacy is required to make also governments recognize the issue of internal displacement in situations where it might not currently be the case, and again, what role data can play there. So if you want to pick up on those questions in your final 1 minute that I give each of you to just help us close, keep in mind this is your opportunity to give the high-level panel secretariat, which is really leading all this work on the substance of the high-level panel, one recommendation. So I would encourage you to speak directly to them and say from your particular perspective at the national level, at the municipal level, at the community level to really give one input here. So I will reverse the order that we had in terms of our speakers, or mix it up rather. I will start off please with Mr. Angwan from Bamenda municipality. And the clock is ticking. I will stop you short when you come to your 1 minute. Floor is yours.
Hi, this is Jerry Burton. A bomb has dropped off, so I think I'll offer his final remarks for him. First of all, thank you very much for including Abam and the perspective of Bamenda and the IDPs. What I can say from having worked closely with Abam is there's great passion. He's an IDP himself. And there is an idea to look very much at including all of the IDPs, rural and urban, in the uplift of the Bamenda education system. So both to look at their specific needs and to look at them as a whole with a focus on learning to earning. Some of the data he showed you, which is extensive and of course couldn't be covered here, but some of that data looked at 21st century skills, resilience, change skills, digital skills, all of the things that all of the children, especially IDPs, will need to move forward in careers. So I thank you very much on Abam's behalf, and I look forward to all of the things that we're going to do with innovative data collection to help the IDP situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying in your minute. Getwich, you're next. 1 minute. If you cannot come in right now, I'm going to go straight to Mr. Riveral. Mr. Riveral, you spoke to us so eloquently about DROMIC. I had a lot of questions about what made it possible. Maybe you have a recommendation for the high-level panel.
Okay, on DROMIC, what we can do about DROMIC is really to get a lot of the ITs involved try to come up. Actually, the DROMIC is a composition of several small information systems. We have the geodata that takes care about the storms, the storms and everything. And we have we also use the geodata for climate change adaptation and mitigation. We have a simple Excel formula that we are able to compute and help us in allowing us to come in with this disaggregated data. So it is.
And I'm going to stop you there. So you already made a number of points because you're already over 2 minutes. Sorry, I am going to be strict. But you made a number of very important points that we've taken note of.
Yes, thank you very much.
But thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Sabar and Mr. Afghan once more. Let's hope the connection works.
Yeah, thank you. I will be very short. My recommendation to the panel would be, IDP intervention requires a lot of coordination among different entities. So we need coordination, and that has to be spelled out in all approaches to IDPs. And also information sharing is very important. That the approaches that are being designed should be based on the information that is being shared, and working on standards that are acceptable to all partners. And the data collected should be kind of synergized among different entities that are working in the IDPs sector. And last but not the least, the humanitarian and development nexus has to be really explored, so that how we can achieve durable solution by discussing this humanitarian and development nexus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And herewith, thank you very much to all the speakers, but also to the audience that stayed with us faithfully throughout the 1.5 hours. And despite the technical difficulties, thank you very much to the organizers. And please remember that you can see all the discussions and the presentations on the GP20 website, and feel free to reach out to the presenters for more information. I'm very sorry that I cut some of you short. We had to do it to allow everyone to speak. And thank you for so much, such rich insight, which will surely inform the Secretariat's work, but also the GP20 going forward. As you may know, it's currently putting together a compilation of good practices, and I'm sure these discussions will also inform that. Thank you, and herewith I say goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye to everyone.
Goodbye.